I know I could have shot a lot more bucks because I passed up a lot of good tracks. Decent tracks. Wasn't a big track. It was a big buck. It was a mature buck, but it didn't have Bigfoot on it. I always wanted to chase those big footers, like this guy here. 4 5/8 inches on his pad from his toe to the back of his pad.
Ooh.
It was over 1.5 inches wide on the pad.
Wow.
That was a monster foot. But it's been some years since I've seen a track in Maine like that. When I first went up there, you could find those monster tracks that you just lick your chops off of. 93, I chased one, and I didn't get him, but I just slowly chased that one deer. It was one of those big tracks.
We should save some stories for the podcast, huh? What do you think?
Got one more little one, sure. Got one more little story here.
All right.
This is my 1997 trophy. That's what I got in 97.
All you got was a pile of poop,
That's what I got. Yeah.
I don't think there were too many years like that, though. That's probably why
No, there wasn't.
Commemorated it with...
yeah, one of the few.
The Hunt Suburbia podcast presents the Living Legends of Deer Hunting series, a special 3-part series with deer hunting legend, Connecticut Carl, Carl LIESER. All right, we've got another episode of the Hunt Suburbia podcast, and I'm sitting here with CT Carl. Is it CT Carl or Connecticut Carl?
Connecticut Carl. CT's for Connecticut.
Where did that nickname come from?
My good buddy, Gary Merrill, the year we met, he just come out of New Brunswick. I was staying at the motel in Ashland, Maine back then, and anyway, they just come from New Brunswick, and the guy with him had shot a nice 8-pointer in New Brunswick, a little over 200, and I had shot a buck that day. I believe it was the day before Thanksgiving, and it's over there on the wall. I call it the Raincoat Buck. I bought Cabela's latest and greatest, most silent rain gear. Well, it was raining when I started out, and going down for a cut, and the little whippets would flap back on it and hit that raincoat, and pop, pop, pop. And in the meantime, the rain was slacking off, so I pulled it off. I was totally frustrated. It's unbelievable. I paid a lot of money for that suit. And silent. This ain't silent, I never did like rain gear. And so anyway, I took it off, tied it around my waist. And I started up going, and, pretty soon there goes a flag. And, frustrating. Here I am fretting about that raincoat, and wasn't paying any attention to my hunting, and I don't know what it was. It looked like a good sized one, So I was planning on working a chopping all the way around the back edge of it, and it was a select cut in there. It wasn't a clear cut, a select cut. So I started going around in the direction I was headed, and I said maybe I'll catch up with that deer down on the other end somewhere. And then, I don't know what you call it, but you got this feeling. And I turn around and I look behind me, and there goes a doe. I mean, she's right in the crouch, sneaking out the back. I said, doe. I said, it's got to be the buck. So I did a little hook, and I went curled right back in towards where she had to be bedded right there, because I never saw her, and then tried sneaking out. So I sat right up there and had an estrus doe call, and which I've used over the years. Worked great. I still got it, and got that back in, I don't know, late 80s, 90s. But anyway, this was 93, so I worked that doe call a little bit, and 3 or 4 different times, and 7 or 8 minutes has gone by, and I says, well, time to get the grunter out, you know. So I got the grunter out and grunted and burp, burp. Nothing, you know. Waited about another minute and I hit it again. And I heard brush crash and here this buck come running right in. I ended up shooting it at 15 yards. So.
And what he end up weighing?
195.
195.
9-pointer.
Yeah.
195.
Yeah.
So now to get back to the story, you know,
Yep.
like I said, that's where I shot him.
Yep.
And so that night at the restaurant, Gary, they said they just got back from and they were eating dinner and with a couple other guys eating dinner. And I don't know, somebody mentioned me had shot a deer, you know. So Gary says, well, go over and see that guy. You know, he shot a deer, you know, congratulate him. And so his buddy with him, what do you want to go see him for? Hey, the guy shot a deer, congratulate him. So he come over and introduced me, you know, and said, asked me about my deer, you know, 9.195. Want to know where it was hanging? I told him at a friend's house right there in town. And,
So you did tell him.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, you know, he congratulated me and we talked a little bit and come to New Brunswick. And so I went over to their room later and checked out his buddy's 8-pointer and we chatted and stuff. And anyway, next day, Gary goes out and shoots a 15-pointer. Nice deer, I don't know, dressed 230, 235, something like that.
Wow.
And, well, we got snow that night. It turned cold. We ended up getting snow that night. It was cold, blustery cold, inch of snow, wind blowing and howling. And we took a track shot that 15-pointer. Well, he gets back to the restaurant and he comes in, you know. Comes into the restaurant. Where's that Connecticut Carl? You know? And it's stuck.
Because he wanted to show you his point.
Yeah. I want to show me
And you guys have been great friends ever since, right?
We got to be friends, yeah.
Yep.
And I consider him my best friend.
And that's the Larry that you said we were just talking about lives in Vermont.
Yeah.
Yep.
The man shot a passolid deer.
And
A
he,
big buck. He shot 24, 25, 200 pounders.
yeah, and he's just a legend in his own right, huh? And what'd you say about him and Larry? He introduced Larry to kind of explore Maine, or?
He's known Larry for a number of years. When he was younger, they actually worked on a construction job together.
Yep.
And so he knew Larry for years. And Gary started hunting Maine and talked Larry into go over. You know, you got Larry. You got to come to Maine. He says big bucks everywhere. You know. Of course, that was back in the 70s. There was big bucks everywhere.
Back in the heyday.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the nickname stuck, and
Yeah. I picked up on it and decided to use it.
so you've been living in Connecticut now.
Born and raised in Connecticut.
Born and raised in Connecticut.
Yeah.
So how did you get to Proctor, Vermont, where you shot your first deer?
My mother was from Vermont. Born and raised in Wyndham.
Just try to turn it that
Come
way.
from a
Yep.
family. There were nine kids, and my uncles hunted. So I was 15 years old. My brother-in-law went up to hunt with my uncle.
Yep.
And asked if I wanted to go along. Of course, I wanted to go along, and so my mother let me. And everybody that knew her, you know, Francis, you're nuts, giving that kid $15 for a hunting license. And
How old were you?
15.
Yeah, okay.
She says he's not gonna shoot anything, you know. Well, I come back with a deer. My mother says, there. She says, I got my $15 worth of meat, she says.
What was that deer?
It was the 3-pointer,
3-pointer?
135 pounds.
Yeah. What do you remember about the hunt?
Oh, we was hunting an area, and the gun I used was my uncle's 32 Special.
Yep.
And back in those days, you could carry a loaded gun in the truck in the magazine, nothing in the chamber.
Mm-hmm.
You know, but you could carry it in the magazine.
Yep.
So we hunted one spot, and then we went to another, and my uncle had to go pick up a check, his check from work that afternoon. So he said, well, we're going to hunt a couple hours, but he said, I got to go and pick up my check. And so he says, well, if you get into something, don't want to come out, he says, we'll be back later. And so we took off up in the woods, and I'm going along, and here goes this doe running through, and here comes this little 3-pointer right on her tail, just grunting. And he stopped maybe 40 yards up on a hump. Well, I pulled up, click. Of course, I never chambered the round. Boy, I jacked one in quick, First deer, you get away with this stuff. I jacked one in quick, and of course, I took a quick shot. I was nervous, and I drilled it, and it ran over the hill. And, of course, I was all excited just to get a shot at one, and I run up, and of course, he ran away, so I didn't know I hit it. And I remember running up on the top of the hill and saying something about, I'll chase you to the end of the day or something. Whatever, And I got up top, and I started going the way he went, then I spotted him down there. Well, I went running, jumping, I got him, I got him, I got him. I was going. And I'll never forget, I started gutting him, and I had his stomach open, and about ready to the point where, pull the guts out. And a fella come up behind me. I never forget this guy, big. I mean, I was always tall.
You're a big guy.
6-foot kid.
Yeah.
At 15. And this guy, he had to be 6'6" at least. Maybe even 6'8". Big man. Mountain of a man.
Yeah.
I mean, rugged. I got big hands, and he had a hand on his hand. I never forget those hands. Here, let me show you how to do that. Them hands went in, out come the guts, And so, anyway, he gave me a hand dragging it across the hill until I got to the top of the hill where it's all downhill through a pasture. And, of course, I started down the hill with it, and I see my uncle headed up the street, and I'm waving. they finally spotted me.
Were you the only one to get one that
No,
weekend?
my brother-in-law shot one that day too, and my uncle got one earlier.
Good hunting over there in Proctor.
Yeah. Well, we hunted my Uncle Mike, my older uncle. He got one open in the morning. We were up on Fire Hill.
Yeah.
He shot one up there open in the morning.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, right where I grew up there, Rutland.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, what was that? 1965? You were 15. Your first one.
59.
1959.
Yeah, that's why I got 8 decades. Started in the 50. I just got under the gun. 59.
59 was the first deer, and that's what started it all for you.
Yeah.
Yeah. And you've killed a deer in 8.
Shot a lot of little ones until I finally started shooting big ones.
What was the first year you shot a big? When was your first?
91.
91. That big one there.
Real big one. Yeah. Before that, I
So you went 30.
shot like 3 7-pointers, but they weren't big bucks.
Your first 32 years hunting, you weren't hunting big bucks.
No, I was more or less a meat hunter. Brown, it was down. I mean, that's what I grew up in Vermont. We hunted up there. Brown is down. Somebody in the family would put a tag on it because they wanted the meat.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's the way it was.
So 1991, how old were you then?
What was I?
When you first started hunting big bucks?
47.
47. And look at this room that you've accumulated.
I was born in 43.
Yeah.
So 91. Yeah, 47 going on 48.
Huh.
Yeah.
How many 200-pound bucks have you killed?
15.
15.
Yeah.
And that one in 91 is your biggest racked buck, right?
Biggest rack, yeah.
The first one was the biggest racked.
Yeah.
Score. What was the score on him?
165.
165.
Yeah.
And that was
trying to beat it ever since, but can't do it.
Well, you've come awfully close, I can see.
Yeah.
Yeah. So before we'll get into telling some of the stories of these bucks and getting into your strategies and hunting and stuff that we can pass on to folks. But I wanted to. You can let that ring if you want.
Yeah. I don't know.
Let it go. It's totally
Yeah,
cool.
it's a machine to take it.
People aren't going to mind about that.
But
But before we get into those stories, I wanted to touch the picture on the wall there that folks will see because we'll put it out before we started this here. I thought that was Elvis with a big old buck there, and it's your
my grandmother.
grandmother
Yes.
with a giant buck.
Yeah.
Now,
1917 she shot that. My mother was a year and a half old. She called it a doggy.
yep,
Yeah.
a
The
doggy.
story was that she looked out the kitchen window, and that area in Wyndham, Vermont is all woods now.
Yeah,
But back then it was, wide
Farm.
open.
Yeah.
And that little stream we talked about, the fish and be damned story,
Yeah.
ran down behind the house, and on the other side of the stream, up in the pasture, sees this buck going up across the pasture. So she grabbed the shell and the rifle. I can't remember, 35, 40, one of them. It wasn't the gun that was in the picture. It was another gun.
Yep.
And took in pursuit, and it was like maybe 3/4 of an inch of snow on the ground. It had just a little dust in the snow. And she picked the track up, started tracking it. And the buck had bedded, and she got up in the edge of the woods, and the buck jumped up out of her bed and took off straight away from her, and she shot. Never put a hole in the deer. She totally hit him right in the bunghole. Yeah. Went in and broke his back.
Texas
now
heart
she goes
shot.
up to him, and I can remember her telling the story. She goes up to him. She says, it's just like a mad dog. She says the hair on his back of his neck was standing right straight up, and he's up, but he can't go,
Yeah.
And now she, oh, geez, you only took that one bullet. So she started yelling, and a couple of guys that were headed out to go hunting heard her, and they knew it was Lucy. She had a real high-pitched voice, very distinct voice, and they said, that's Lucy, got to be Lucy. So they went up to see, and so one of the guys gave her his rifle, and she shot him in the neck and finished him off.
He was paralyzed there?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then my Uncle Mike, he was the oldest boy. He come up, and he was always the jokester in the family, always, his whole life. And so anyway, she told him to go get his father. He was up cutting wood. And so anyway, Mike goes up and gets his father, and his father was already headed home with the horse and wagon, and continued, he thought Mike was one of his fibs jokes, and went to the house, then had to turn around and go back up when he realized that she got a buck.
Was that her only buck?
Yeah, the only deer she ever shot.
Yeah.
She hunted, not an awful lot, but she did hunt a little bit.
Yeah. Well, that's awesome. It's a terrific picture. We'll overlay it so people can see it. And I wanted to kind of go back.
That was on the cover of the Vermont Sportsman in '95.
No kidding.
Yeah, that picture and story of that.
No kidding. But yeah, I say all that to kind of bring it back. It's always interesting to know where, especially, hunters like yourself have just built a name for yourself, and where it all started, and where the heritage started. So her dad.
It's on my mother's side.
Yep.
Fortunately, my father was an alcoholic. He didn't hunt, so I never picked up hunting from my father.
Yep.
And actually, I started hunting when I was 14. I've always regretted it, but I traded a set of Civil War swords dated 1861 and 1862. Two nice Civil War swords made in Massachusetts to my brother-in-law for a .22 rifle so I could go hunting. So that's when I started hunting squirrels and stuff.
Yeah.
But both of us, and he turned around and traded the swords for something else later on. And, this dying day, we both still say, oh, we wish we had those swords.
Well, so how far can you trace back hunting in your family? Like your great grandfather, you told the story. You told the story about the, fish be damned.
Yeah,
story.
fish and be damned. Yeah.
And he was a hunter, or no?
Yeah.
Yep.
Actually, I got some Indian in me, Sioux Indian, and I haven't never verified it, but my grandfather always said that we were related to Sitting Bull. We're direct descendant. I think it was my great-great-grandmother.
Yeah. Wow.
Was a direct descendant of Sitting Bull. So.
Well, these days with the technology, you can send in some DNA if you wanted to, or just leave it as.
We've been around for a number of years on both sides of the family.
Yeah. All right, so then we get into the birth of Carl as a hunter, and then you got that deer in Vermont, and did that did that get you addicted to hunting at that
Oh
point?
yeah. I've always liked hunting. I remember as a little kid traveling, tagging along with our neighbors. They go bird hunting, and squirrel hunting, and stuff. I always liked it. And of course, I was a fisherman as a little kid. I grew up in Marlboro. We had Black Ledge River run through the farm, and 3 little feeder streams going into the Black Ledge that
Yep.
ran into the stream on the farm. That was great little brook trout fishing. Since I was 8 years old, I've been running around up in the woods and stuff fishing.
Yep.
Today, my parents get arrested, allowing an 8-year-old to run off,
Yeah, it's a different time.
half 3/4 mile up in the woods and fish a little brook stream back out.
Well, this day and age, you're not going to find, most women anyways aren't going to grab a shell and go out and track down a buck and like your grandmother did either.
Yeah,
It's
there's
just
a
different.
few of them though.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's some good hunters out there, lady hunters now.
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
But I mean, she was probably just in the kitchen cooking, doing something, and saw it happen, and she's like, "I'm gonna go get that buck."
Just in the kitchen and see it come down through the pasture.
Yep.
Went and chased it.
So you killed probably, I don't even know how many bucks between that Vermont one and that your first giant.
Myself.
You killed tons of deer.
Not a lot. I probably killed 100 deer, but I don't know. I was never into how many I could shoot.
Yeah.
It's just
Well, you weren't keeping track.
Finally, like I said, I was a meat hunter, and when I first started hunting, especially when I was younger, I had a family and a wife, and that came first. I'd hunt for a week. That was it.
Yep.
Take a week and go to Vermont, and then maybe go back up for Thanksgiving weekend for an extended weekend. But so it was brown. It was down illegal. And,
yeah. Well, let's talk about then what changed in you. What was the switch where you started hunting that way?
My buddy Timmy Smith. You asked the picture over there if that was me, and that was Tim.
Yep.
Tim Smith.
Yep.
Tim was more of a trophy hunter than I ever thought of being years ago. And anyway, we went to Maine to shoot a big buck. And so I was still in that mode, shooting bucks, but little ones, 4 or 6 pointer, young deer. And so he bet me a steak dinner that I couldn't pass a deer up. Because I was just in that mode. Brown, okay, bang. It was legal. So I finally collected the steak dinner.
But so what's the story on this buck? Did you it was that trip with him or no?
Yes. But we hunted together one year and decided we hunted differently.
Yeah.
So after that, we always went. We shared a room together, but we brought 2 vehicles, and he went hunting, and I went hunting.
Yeah.
Probably my best tribute to hunting is hunted alone for years.
Yep.
I've been a loner when it comes to hunting.
I was going to ask you if you had a gang you go with or
no.
It's important to find somebody who's your own style too.
Yeah.
If you're going to have a hunting buddy, they got to hunt like you.
Yeah. And so you get back to that. Timmy and I hunted differently, and I got to be friends with Gary Merrill, and I call him my best friend. But we hunt quite a bit alike.
Yeah.
So that kind of doesn't mesh. What are you going to do? 2 guys ride around and you find a track. Who's going to, all right, you take it. It's just, so we've gone on some hunting trips and stuff, but we hunt a little differently. Best we both take our own vehicles. So, but no, hunting alone. I've always said that, I find a track to take. When I get out of the truck, I don't slam the door. I just quietly press it and close it.
Because he could be 100 yards away. You never know.
How many times you've been up on a mountain, heard somebody down a mile away slam a door?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, a group of guys get out. You can hear them talking a mile away.
Yeah, you can.
Yeah. Well, deer hear this too. So I've always learned to be pretty quiet
and they live most of their time up there not hearing that. So then deer season comes around, and they start to hear it a lot more, and they'll just probably be a little extra cautious.
And I'm old school. I just totally old school when it comes to hunting. Go out and just take off, and here we go. It's just I had to get out of that mold. Because when I first went to Maine, oh joy, I like that ridge there, and away I'd be gone all day long.
Yep.
Stomping, looking for track rather than stay in the truck, ride around, wait for snow, stay in the truck, ride around, get a track, and take it.
So is that what you started doing when you got more successful?
Yeah.
Is riding around finding a good track?
Yeah.
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 Talk about that process a little bit. What would you give advice to people starting out, never tracked before? How do you get a good track, and where's your starting point?
It's tough to go in the woods because now if you go in a piece of woods, there ain't a damn buck in there.
Mm-hmm.
You can spend all day long. It's just it's best to. Well, I would always, when there was snow on the ground, I was always the first one through the gates, up in Maine. The people at the gates, they would always say, you're always the first one through. Well, I'd be out there 2 hours before daylight running the roads looking for a track.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you find a good one, you'd settle on it and wait for it.
Yeah. No, when I found the monster, I wouldn't go any further. But you locate 3 or 4 different bucks and take what you thought was the best one, and rather than what my normal used to what I grew up hunting. We went in the woods. So I grew up with a group. There was always 3 or 4 of us, sometimes 4 or 5. When we hunted Vermont, we'd go up on the mountain, and everybody, whoever spoke up first got to go there. I'm going to go. A lot of times I'd be the last one. Well, I don't know, I'm going that way. Nobody's going that way. It's not hunting too smart. You're going out there. You're hunting hard, stumbling around through the woods, but you're not hunting too smart.
Yeah.
It's just, it's the way it was. So, even though I was a pretty good hunter, shot quite a few deer, but I really didn't get into tracking real. I mean, I tracked deer in Vermont. I tracked a couple of deer in Vermont and shot them, but not.
Before you were trophy hunting, before you were getting the big ones.
Yeah. I mean, my uncle Rupert lived in Wyndham, Vermont. He was the hunter in the family. He fed the family back in the Depression with venison. He was a hunter and he was a tracker. And I can remember, I never got enough of his stories. Got a couple of years worth. I hunted with him because every year one day we'd go down and hunt with Rupert, and never got enough of his tracking stories, And but then, when I was 17, I quit school and went in the service, and he passed away while I was in the service, so I never could really pick his brain.
Yeah.
But
got a couple good years of memories with him though.
Yeah. But I always that's mainly where my tracking come from, that side of the family. And I hunted with my Uncle Roland. They all would track. All the uncles would track. But Rupert was the hunter. He shot a lot of deer.
So what is the most important thing about tracking that you can pass on to somebody? What's the most important thing to be consistent?
A lot of things. I know a couple of times I give up on a track, and boy, I kicked my keister because I didn't run it till dark, which I should have. I was on a monster track, and he went down.
Hold it like that. There you go. Yep.
And crossed the Machias River, and I stomped across the Machias River and up above my knees in water.
Yep.
Got my feet wet and everything up the other side, and I chased him. It was 3:30 in the afternoon, and I come up on a mountain. I'm in the woods I've never been before in my life, so I don't know what's out there. And I look over, and I could look back down to Machias Lake. And by the time I get back down the road, it's going to be dark, and I still got probably 2 miles to walk around. I ain't going to walk across the river again, get back to the truck. So I let the track go. He ran away from me for a while, and I started really hoofing. I was getting the track back fresh. It was coming back nice and fresh.
Yep.
And so anyway, the next day, Sunday, he says, I got to know. So I go back out there and go up and pick up his track where I left it. And goes down, he probably went another half mile, short half mile. Goes down onto, there's an old logging road there, which Maine is, they got logging roads everywhere.
Yeah.
I didn't know this. And so he crossed the logging road, went down in, there was a pretty good stream down in there. He made a circle, comes back up to the logging road. Just a few yards down the road where he went down in, made a circle, and come back out.
Yeah.
And rubbed on alder bush, just trashed on alder bush. And I'm thinking, if I stayed on his track, I could have.
Probably would have caught him.
He went down over top of a gravel bank. I said, I come out the top of that gravel bank, there's a chance I could have caught him.
Oh, yeah.
Right there rubbing that bush.
Yeah.
And I just, I always kick myself for, not staying on that deer till dark.
So is
you
it?
You can walk out in the dark.
Yeah. So don't give up on a track is what you'd say.
Yeah.
Yeah. Don't be afraid of the dark. If you're afraid of the dark in there, and maybe tracking's not for you.
And you never know when you're going to catch up to them either,
So you were that track started out kind of cold, and you freshened it up. You were finally making ground.
Well, no, it was a smoking track when I started on it.
All right.
Because I went down in the road.
Yep.
And it was just breaking daylight, and I saw an old track, which I believe was in a big track. It had snow in it, but it was a big one. And so I went down in, the road goes down in there, dead ends, and I come back up through there probably 20 minutes later, and he had crossed behind me.
Yeah.
So, and just a little, and I know Machias River is on the backside of that ridge.
Yeah.
So I'm thinking, oh, Christ, where the track went, he's going downwind. I says, I'm going back down around the corner where I saw that old track. I'm going to backtrack that old track up in there. I said, we're going to intersect. Sure enough, I got up in on top, and I'm looking for him. Finally, I come on this track, down over the other side. Went across the Machias River. I stopped across the river. Like I said, I was above my knees in water. Boots soaking wet. Come up the other side, and I got a picture of it. There's a 12-inch maple tree that Buck walked up to and rubbed, so he was wide.
Yep.
He wasn't one of these to come back in tight.
Yep.
And rubbed that 12-inch maple tree. I got a picture of it. And that's when we ended up took him, and I left him go later that afternoon there about 3:30.
But how do you, how important is regulating your speed on the track? So when knowing when to slow down, when to speed up.
Yeah, it's if they're going, you go.
Yeah.
Yeah. If you see them
match the pace,
slow up, start meandering, back and forth, and they usually start picking feet or something, and then you slow down on them. I've always wondered over the years. I swear to God, if a buck has to chew his cud, that he does it on the go.
Yep.
Because I've chased so many bucks where they've slowed down and fed. Well, that one there I was just talking about. A couple of different times he slowed up and fed, and then he took off again, and then he stopped again and fed, and I'm slowing up, stopping, looking and sneaking and.
But he never laid down.
Then he's back. No, never laid down.
Yeah.
No, back going. I've chased a lot of them that way, where they fed and they've never bedded down. So I think they chew their cuds on a go if they have to.
Yeah.
Chew it. I don't know.
Maybe it's Maybe it's a personality trait,
Yeah.
For individual deer.
Yeah. But it went in the rut, and they're roaming.
So that could trip a lot of people up because you're kind of classically taught when you're tracking. If you see him meandering and slowing down to feed, you got to really take your time.
Yeah.
But you could be losing
that slows
ground.
you out. Yeah, you're losing because now he's decided he's back traveling again. Now you're going away from me again.
So is that something that you ended up not really doing because of that experience? Would you just keep going when you saw them meandering,
I mean,
or
you got to slow up because if they're bedded right there. I took a track. I saw the track early in the morning. I'm riding. I can't find another track. Finally, 11 o'clock, I says, well, I'm going back that morning and take that track. Well, I didn't track that buck a half of an hour, and I come to his bed. And he started feeding. Got up out of his bed. He's meandering around, feeding some more. He didn't go another 50 yards and bedded again. Then he got up out of that bed, and he's feeding again. And this is late in the year, muzzleload, trying to replenish himself.
Yep.
He beds down a third time. Well, this third time when he bedded down, I kicked him out of his bed, and while the chase was on, I chased him about 4 hours. He went down through the woods and made a big circle. Took me through, they'll take you through some awful shit. And just back around. And finally, he went 3 o'clock in the afternoon. He went back down across the road, close to where he crossed it that morning, down into a shit old one on the other side. I said, see you later, buddy.
Gave up on that one.
Yeah.
Some of them it's okay.
Yeah.
You don't want to kill yourself.
Oh, I've gone on some awful hikes chasing deer and long walks back.
Yeah. Well, when you're driving around, you're looking for tracks. Now, a 4-incher. Now that one, right? That first one, you said it was 4. Talk about that deer's track.
4 5/8 inches.
Yeah.
His hoof from his toe to the back of his pad. 4 5/8, and 1.5 inches wide. The pad, one side the pad, 1.5 inches. That track is 3 inches wide to start with.
Yeah.
Closed toe.
So that was an absolute no-brainer. You're like, you can see that one probably.
I got up there, and I had seen a big buck the year before in that area, big track, and so I first got there was some old snow on the ground, and I see his track. It was old, but I took it, and learn a little bit on where he's going and stuff, And in the meantime, you never know, you might freshen it up.
Yep.
And so I didn't do nothing. I did end up, when I was headed out of the woods, I picked up another buck track, a small one, and followed it, and Jesus Christ, I jumped that deer going away from me. He had a wide rack on me. A small track, but he had a rack on it. That's why I say I passed up a lot of good bucks that I know I could have tracked down and shot because I want that bigger one.
And that was that same day on this big one? That you jumped that wide buck? Yeah.
No, he was an old track.
Yep.
And I spent a couple more days in there looking around. I didn't see no movement. And then we had fresh snow, 5-6 inches of fresh snow on the ground. And I'm going up the road, and there he goes. 3 deer across the road. It was him, a doe, and a 4-pointer.
This one?
Yeah.
You saw him?
No, I see the track.
Okay, all right, yeah.
So I bailed out. There he is. That's that big track. A monster. They went down and cutting down in there, and one of them select cuts, fairly open.
Yep.
And they got down in there, and they were round in circles, and round in tracks going everywhere. The same 3, they take a set, go out, and they come back into that core area there. And I took another one out and come back into the core area. And finally, I took the 3rd set out and following this. Now they went out, and they went down over and went into the Machias River. And I said, oh, no, you want it. And there's no way I'm crossing that river there. It's too swift in there and too deep. And so I follow along the river a little ways. I said, well, I'll go downstream. Maybe I'll see him on the other side or whatever.
Did they cross? I'm sorry. Did they cross
no,
right
they
in
didn't.
the swift stuff?
He was chasing her. She went in the river, and she went down about 50 yards. They came back out. Mm-hmm. Followed them up around. Now they headed back east along the river, but they're up in the woods.
Yeah.
And so I'm tracking them and going down. Finally, they turned and started back down in towards the river and got down into a stand of spruce that they left. They didn't cut, but it was open spruce, nice heavy spruce open in there. You could see pretty good. And pretty soon, here comes the doe, right up across in front of me, about 30 yards in front of me. She's running up through. And I hear, you know, I go, oh boy, here he comes, you know. And he come running right up through, and I tucked one behind his shoulder. And I watched him go. He didn't go 30 yards. I watched him go down. And I walked over and looking at him, a little 4-pointer. He come running up about 20 yards from me. He stopped there looking. I made his day, though, and he continued on with the doe.
Yeah, he got the lady.
Yeah.
Now, so what were you feeling at that point? That was by far the biggest deer you'd ever shot. Still is actually rack-wise, right?
Yeah.
So what was it just an awesome feeling, and you're like, I got to keep doing this?
Yeah. No, it was like a relief. I finally got a big buck. You know?
47 years old.
Yeah.
And now you've
because I had missed. I can tell you some horror stories of some good bucks over the years.
The ones that got away.
Yeah. Well, I can tell you a story and to relate back to this guy.
The one right behind you here?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Years ago, I'm still hunting Vermont. I'm down in Windham, up on Glebe Mountain. Mm-hmm. And I'm going down through, and I jumped this big buck. Probably at that point in time, biggest one I ever see hunting.
Yep.
You know, it was a big rack buck. And he going straight away from me. You know, I put the gun up, and I got my old 300 Savage, got a scope on it, and didn't have a lot of experience shooting and running deer, you know.
Yep.
I'm on him, I'm off, you know. And finally, I never shot. And I stood there, you know. There were times you were right on that deer, you know, pull the damn trigger, you didn't pull it, you know. And I was young, in my 20s, and I always remember that. You know, you got to shoot.
Yeah.
Well, years later, I'm going to New Brunswick. In New Brunswick opened a week ahead of Maine. So went up on a Saturday. Didn't need to get to New Brunswick. I'll spend the night. So I was in there the year before. I shot that one way on the end, the small buck over there.
Yep.
And so I said, I'm going back in there and scalp. So the year before, it was after that. The year before, I going in, and there was a winter road goes in, one you can't drive on.
Yep.
And you go down, there was a little spur kind of cut back on an angle. The only one up in there, maybe a quarter of a mile.
Yeah.
And so I was in there hunting, you know, and boy, this is a perfect spot to rattle. So anyway, the next morning when I come in, walking down the road, I could cut, instead of going down that road and walk up in, I could cut a little, just, you know, maybe 300 yards over through the woods, and I'd be right on the back end of that. It was a perfect spot to rattle. I scoped it out the day before. I'm saying, oh, it's a good spot. So I'm at that point where I was going to start cutting across,
yep.
And I hear a moose start bellowing. And oh, Christ, the moose are over there. There ain't no deer over there. So I walked down and turned around, and I walked up that road. And I get up to that cut, and right where I was going to set up over there, and there goes this big buck, white rack. I'm pretty sure it was the same buck. You never know. But,
yeah. Yep.
You know, never give me an opportunity for a shoot. Oh, boy. And I was going right over there. I was going to rattle that sucker in. So back to where the next year, going to New Brunswick, I says, I'm going back over there. Of course, I hunted in there, and I found his scrape line. Come down through the woods, cross that road, and he made a circle through that cutting.
Big scrapes?
Yeah, big scrapes and couple good rubs on it. And so heading to New Brunswick, I said, I'm going to go in there and check to see if he's working that scrape line. Mm-hmm. And so sure enough, So I built me a little blind. Found a good spot. Built me a little blind. It's opening day. I'm going in there and rattle. So 100 to Brunswick for a week. Come back to Maine. Opening day. I go in there and rattle. Spent a couple hours there and nothing. So I said, well, I go take a hike. I ain't going to sit around all day. I'm not a sitter. I'm lucky. I don't know how I lasted 2 hours, but I did. And so I took off. Went for a hike. Went up over, rid down like that logging road that forked in there another time. Crossed that fork and making a swing around through. And coming up through, they had select cutted, a lot of beech in there.
Yeah.
And jumped that buck.
The one on the far end, right?
This guy.
Oh, this one here. Yeah. Okay.
And now we're back to the point about shooting.
Yeah.
Well, he's going across in front of me, I just come through an opening, bang! I don't know if I shot right in front of him and hit a tree or what, but he stopped dead and done a U-turn and went running.
Directly back the other way?
Directly back the other way. And now I tried to get in the same opening.
Yeah.
And Christ, he went through that scope. Whoa, I never kept up with him. And so now he's back to about where he started. Now he turns and goes straight away. Second jump. Third jump. He disappeared. In my mind working 90 miles an hour, back to what I've tuned myself in. You got to shoot in these situations.
Yeah.
I said, Carl, that second jump, you were all over his ass. He's right there. Pull the trigger, and I did.
Yeah.
Never saw the deer. So I go over and get to where I last see him start falling, and I see him laying up there. What happened was
he was dead?
Picture
Yeah.
right here. I think you can see there's a little blowdown right there, or a tree that was bent over.
Yeah.
What happened was he got to that.
This one here?
Yeah. Instead of jumping up, instead of coming up for the third jump, he went down under a tree, that small tree that was bent over.
Yep.
He went down and under it, and as I pulled the trigger, he come back up, and I took him right dead in the back of the neck and piled him right there.
Look at that. How much do you weigh?
260 pounds.
Oh, that's the 260.
Yeah.
That's your biggest weight?
Yeah.
Yeah, he is huge. Bare ground.
I was in camp in New Brunswick with some guys from Pennsylvania, and their motto was, the lead ain't flying, you ain't hitting nothing.